and the Tiny Mite. That is a French Fauvel flying wing. I cannot remember who owned it. Jack Lambie bought it right after the meet. That's a 119. You'll recognize all kinds of ships in here. The white one in the foreground is the Prue 160. There's the Jenny May Prue ship. The 160 was built from a drop tank, and Carl Zeiler, right there with the patch on his eye, flew it. He was badly burned in a military aircraft accident, always had a patch on his eye, and his hands were full of skin grafts. But it was a little tiny ship, and he was a peach of a pilot and a nice person. Don't know whatever became of him. There's Del Reed's Chartreuse Goose, which is an LK that he flat-topped and single-seated. There's the little Doggie. And this meet is the first time those three little ships were all together. It was years before that had ever happened. This guy claimed he became a hermit because a female in Fort Worth had done him wrong. He lived out in the hills of California. Reeves was taking the pictures. This was the California CAA, might have been CAA then.
That's old Oxford.
That was on the right. And Betty Jean Reynolds, Phil Easley, Jock Powell in the cockpit. That wasn't Backstrom, was the convertible.
Guy took his cap off?
No. That was the California, either CAA or FAA. There's the plank taken off at Grand Prairie Airport. What a pretty sky. This is a 123 that Larry Gerline from Erie, Pennsylvania had modified, brought to the 55 Nationals in Texas, and he was afraid to fly it. He hadn't been up in it yet, and he asked Wally to take it up and ring it out, which Wally did. And when he landed, he told Larry to go ahead and fly it. Everything was okay. Among other things, he took the landing gear out, and when Wally came in and landed, he was rocking like a kid on a rocking horse. You will notice no gear, no wheel. That's one of Gerline's dogs and one of his kids. That's our Cocker Spaniel Taffy. This is Paul Schroeder with his midget racer. That was at Grand Prairie. There's Wally buzzing the tow plane in EJ's old 123, which by this time belonged to Monty Montgomery. EJ had had some trouble with it up in Elmira and made a bad landing and brought it back to Dallas and had one of the trade schools fix it, and they put the wings together wrong, but it was better for high speed. And I had never taken movies until now, and I dropped the camera and took people's heads and radio antennas instead of the aircraft. This was a little air show, as I recall, Labor Day or something like that. Now we're down in Houston, Texas. Bob Thomas had asked us to come down. Beautiful clouds, but they were all full of water. That's Del Lewis with the pretty TG2 that he and Ken Jacobs built. I think that's John Carsey with him. This is the plank taken off down at the ranch. Probably had been down there in the shop working on it. And I believe the flight terminates up at, up at Grand Prairie. I think the PT-22 that the Easley, Backstrom, Powell gang owned towed it just then. This would be about February '54 because that was my new Chevrolet. Now we're down in Austin, Texas. That's Dave Malcolmus's Pratt Reed. It's beautiful. Oh, it's a pretty one. And that's Wally and EJ's 123, and it didn't have any brakes, and it was a 5,000-foot paved runway, and I told Wally he'd either land short or he could walk it back. I wasn't going to. There's the pretty Fairchild that Dell and Ken did, and the Via that belonged to Shelley Charles, and Reeves promoted it for TSA to own. I believe Wally's flying it. Yeah, that's the north end of the ranch runway in the cotton field there, and he floated like mad in that British ship. I wasted a whole bunch of film trying to get him to come in and land. He was practicing for short field landings because we were about to take off for New York for another meet. Via is very good at short field landings.